So, welcome to Sunday Assembly. And I'm sure everybody knows who we are, but we're just going to go over it really quickly anyway. We are a secular congregation, which means that basically we believe in three main factors. One, live better. Two, help often. And three, wonder more. So, to live better, we got more people coming in. Let's see. All right, so computer's got a mind of its own now. So living better, we pretty much invoke thought and good ideas and support each other versus telling other people, well, I'm happy and you need to live the way I do so you can be happy too. We like to help often. I'm sure you've seen a lot of our committees involve people helping others, participations, and just doing good deeds all together. And wondering more. We're big into education. Today we're going to learn about bats. We're going to talk about some knowledge sharing sessions, and we're going to have a good time. So maybe it's just me, but 90s had some of the best music. We can argue about that later. So life happens. Every day something interesting happens to us, or at least I hope it does. Does anybody have anything they want to share? You can raise your hand in person, or you can raise your hand. Seeing people eating breakfast. That's life happens. Not calling anyone out. Relax.
I've got something.
All right.
I was furloughed a while ago and been on and off work. And I'm going to work tomorrow and all that stuff. But during that time I was furloughed, I applied for unemployment, and because my identity had been stolen back in 2018, there was a big, huge hang up, and I've been calling them almost every day for months to try to get that straightened out. I finally just got it straightened out with them, and I'm supposed to actually get some unemployment next week, which will be nice because it'll be the first time. So it's great. The system does work. They're very overwhelmed with the unprecedented number of people calling them, but yay.
Oh, congratulations. Now,
Thank you.
Is it going to be retro?
Yes.
Oh, good, good.
Yeah.
All right, well, congratulations on that. Let's see, we had Alex.
Yeah, I turned 30 yesterday. So.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Dirty 30. Good for you. Happy birthday.
Yeah, I also just started a new position where I'm working Monday through Friday, and I don't have to work every other weekend anymore.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thanks.
All right, and CJ, you had your hand up. What's up?
Yeah, so I think last month I talked about how I took in a foster cat who was pregnant, and she had her babies, 3 of them. They're healthy. They're 6 days old and thriving. So glad that everyone is good and healthy.
Glad to hear. Congratulations. All right, Vijaya.
You can't pronounce my name right, Vijaya. So as of this weekend, the Michigan Skeptics Group had a change in the leadership. It was started by Adam Burke. I know some of you are also members of that group. So he has to move to Virginia because he has got a job with Big Brother. And so I have taken over that group. So that's life happening. I mean, I'm not going to do the entire work. I do have some other members helping me, some of the founding members, but the group is 10 years old. And I am hoping to work with you guys, Anthony and Austin and anybody else, and kind of keep this group alive, because we have been having a lull in the secular groups, and things are kind of falling apart in a lot of places. So I'm hoping that we can all work together and keep these groups going. So that's the life that is happening to me.
Congratulations, that's awesome. Do you have you guys have a web page too, or a Facebook group or something like that?
Yeah, we have Facebook. We have we're on Meetup. It's Michigan Skeptics, basically, and yeah, there are a bunch of members in Sunday Assembly that are also in that group. So I actually originally found out about Sunday Assembly when Susan came to Michigan Skeptics, and that's when a lot of us joined Sunday Assembly. So, but yeah, that group is 10 years old. We used to meet in Westland, actually Plymouth for a long time at the CJ's Brewing Company. And then before the pandemic, we were at One Under, the bar in Livonia, and now we're online, just like you guys are. But yeah, we're looking forward to a reboot and do something, but mainly to stay alive at this point, you know.
So what is the goal of Michigan Skeptics?
Mainly, I mean, you know, we don't like the label of atheists, and you know, Michael Sharber, he was the guy that started the American Skeptics, basically skeptics.org. So we were kind of following along his thought process, basically to pick up ideas that are controversial and show the both sides of the equation and be skeptical about everything: religion, UFOs, you know, medicine that is, you know, alternative medicine or anything, any quack jobs that come up. So we used to have a lot of speakers each month that would come and talk about topics like the UFO sightings in Michigan, or like ghost hunters. And so interesting, sometimes weird TV guys or like speakers from University of Michigan sort of thing. So basically, yeah, being skeptical about things, including religion.
Okay, well, it sounds good. I'm sure a lot of people are can cross over from that. If you want to, you know, work side by side, that sounds good to me. So yeah, just keep sending out that information.
Okay.
Anybody else with life happens? Good stuff. All right, moving on. So monthly reading. This week I'm going to do a monthly reading, and it's going to have a visual as well. I'm going to warn you up front, this may get just a little bit graphic, not too horribly. So right now we live in a world where social media is king, where communication, as you were talking about just a second ago, you know, it's really big, where things go viral just like that. I remember back in 2012 during the Boston Marathon bombing, within a day, the internet was covered with surveillance cameras, pictures of two guys that they were sure these are the guys we're looking for, these are the guys that did it, and they weren't even close to being who they are. They had nothing to do with it. This is even the FBI discovered, you know, heard about these guys through Facebook. So, you know, it can be dangerous, but it can also have a lot of positives. This picture is the very first picture that went viral across the world. It was taken in 1904 in the Congo. At the time, the Congo was owned by the King of Belgium, King Leopold II. And it wasn't the country Belgium itself that owned the land, but the king himself, he was the owner of the land, because the Congo is filled with rubber trees. And that's where you get your natural rubber, which was in high demand, still is in high demand, and was extremely, very, very lucrative. Well, he took over the land and he enslaved the people and just treated them horribly. It was much worse than anything that happened in America. with the slavery that was going on here. And keep in mind that this was in the 20th century that this was going on. It was early in the 20th century. And there was a journalist named Lady Alice Seeley Harris, who went down there to just basically find out what was going on in the Congo. And she found this man. He came to her and he brought her, which if you can see that he's looking at a hand and a foot that was actually belonged to his daughter. That's how bad they treated the people there. And she took his picture, she wrote a book, and this book went viral across the world, and everybody was just amazed at how a single human being could treat others this way. And I'm gonna read an excerpt from the book. He hadn't made his rubber quota for the day, so the Belgian appointed overseers had cut off his daughter's hand and foot. Her name was Boali. She was 5 years old. Then they killed her, but they weren't finished. Then they killed his wife too. And because that didn't seem quite cruel enough, quite strong enough to make their case, they cannibalized both Bali and her mother, and they presented Nasala with the tokens, the leftovers from once living body of his darling child whom he loved. His life was destroyed. So, I know it's kind of graphic, but world has positives, world has negatives, and we should all strive to be more positive.
Great. All right. Okay, everyone, here we go. We are going to get a chance to look at bats today and talk about these unbelievable marvels that we have flying around us at night. The main takeaway I hope everyone gets from this is that bats are cool. They're really neat, and hopefully there'll be something in here you don't already know. But I can say, as someone who does already know everything in this talk, that even if you don't happen to learn something, it's still a lot of really neat stuff. So I'm sure a lot of people were looking forward to a lot of cool bat pictures. So let's start right off with that. Here's a cute bat licking his thumb. And other cool bat pictures, maybe a little more scary, is this one here. They have a wide variety of different tooth styles because they have a wide variety of different diets. And of course, everyone's favorite, the flying fox. Here again, letting us know that that he doesn't necessarily think everything should be too serious, so he's sticking his tongue out at us. So an overview of what I'm going to cover. I'm going to talk about how bats are cool, a little bit about their evolutionary history, and then some of the human reactions to bats, and that we already saw a little bit of today. Talk about some of the really cool things about bats, and some of the scientific details, and some of the things they do for us. So I hope everyone comes up with some good questions. We'll have a little time for questions, and you can save them to the end if you like, or if it's a burning question, feel free to jump right in. Either way, here we go. Okay, bats are our cousins. They're not closer to us in being related to us than, say, monkeys or apes or something like that. But because all mammals are all on the same family tree, they're our cousins just by being mammals. And of course, that actually applies to all life on Earth. The really neat thing about life on Earth is that because it all evolved from one common ancestor, we're literally all on the family tree, the same family tree. Here's the same family tree of all life on Earth. And bats are way over here on the right, along with us, just the way that it's drawn. So we can, if we looked at a family tree, a lot of people have done their own family tree. And you can see here, if you looked at, say, two people, let's say Sydney Howes down here and Jacob Howes, you can see that they're not siblings, and so they're actually cousins. And if you looked in this, you might ask, well, when's the last time you had someone who was the ancestor of both of them? It wouldn't be Michael Howes because he's not an ancestor of Sydney. So it would be Barbara or Peter up here, and that would be their last common ancestor or most recent common ancestor, which is the terminology used by biologists when we talk about the family tree of life. So we talk about the most recent common ancestor, and that's very often abbreviated among scientists and biologists as the MRCA. So if we look at the most recent common ancestor here again, we're going back to Peter or Barbara. And the really neat thing is that because we're all in the same family tree, you can do exactly that with literally any two living things. So you can do that between you and your sister, or you can do that between you and the oak tree in the backyard, or whatever you like. In this case, when we look at the family tree and we do that with regards to bats, this is what we see. We see that way along on the mammal side here, our last common ancestor with bats was a good ways back before the dinosaur extinction 65 million years ago, the famous one with the giant asteroid that killed so many creatures, including dinosaurs. So when we look more closely at the mammal family tree, what we see is here is the line to bats. And the bats form two main groups now, the Microchiroptera and the Megachiroptera. So those are the two main groups of bats that we have around us. And if you look similarly, here's the pathway that goes to human beings. You can see from this diagram that our last common ancestor was 97 million years ago or so. We can tell that both from fossil evidence and other features like that, in addition to the DNA. If we look at the DNA, you can use what's called a molecular clock, and by looking at small sections of DNA that aren't under selective pressure, you can actually count the number of changes in them and get a decent estimate as to when any two creatures had their last common ancestor. So for us, that was about 97 million years ago, way back in the dinosaur time. This is in the middle of the Cretaceous, which is the last major era of dinosaur life. So if we look back then and look even further, we can see that all mammals are descended from something that looks roughly like this. And our last common ancestor with bats would have been well after this. The amazing thing here is in the mammal lineage, just like in a lot of vertebrates, we've done incredible things with our bodies as far as evolution goes. And here we can focus on these hands, these little furry hands and feet down here. If we look at that for humans and bats, it's incredible what we find. We find that the bones have been stretched way out to make these wings. These wings are literally hands. And that is exactly what the biological name says. Chiro means hand, and ptera means wing. So they are literally hand wing. And that's exactly what we see, because their hand is stretched out to make the wing. Chiro, you might be familiar with a chiropractor. That's someone who heals with his hand. So the hands are stretched out like this to form a wing, and they have a lot of the same bones. One thing that's really cool is that if you look at the different ways vertebrates have evolved wings over time, you find that evolution has come up with a completely different type of wing every time. And so you can see that with birds, the hand bones are shrunken down into the wing, and the wing is mostly composed of feathers. You can see with the pterosaurs, like the pterodactyl or the pteranodon, that the wing is made by taking one finger and making it insanely long. This has got to be the longest finger in the vertebrate family tree as a whole, to be able to make a whole wing by stretching out one finger. The neat thing about the bat hand wing is that you can actually see all these bones. If you took a look at a bird wing, you really can't see the bones very well, and they're kind of scrunched in there and buried under feathers. But with bats, there's the hand bones right there for everyone to see. So If we look over human history on a much shorter time frame, then how do people see bats? Well, they see them in a number of different ways. We're used to, ways that are familiar in our own culture. For many of us, that might be a more Western view. But there's a lot of views in addition to the one we grew up in. And for instance, if we take a look at a lot of Native American views of bats, we see that the bats are often seen as there's often a bat god. So we look here, and here's various bat gods from the Americas, especially from Central America and South America. We can look. Now, I don't know enough about those cultures to say how many of these gods were portrayed very positively or in a more scary light. I really don't know. And as we'll see, different cultures include both of those things. We see that in Western culture too. I'll get to some of the negative ones in a minute, but there's positive ones too. I mean, after all, Batman is a superhero. So if we look at older depictions in Western culture, a lot of us are familiar with Dracula, and obviously associated with bats. Vampires are assumed to turn into bats and back and forth and consume blood. One thing that is a little bit surprising about this is if you look at Western history, many people might be familiar with the fact that a lot of the legends of the vampire Dracula are based on an actual historical figure, just because he killed a lot of people in military campaigns, and that was Vlad the Impaler. And we also know that there are actually bats that do consume blood. The vampire bats do consume blood. They don't actually suck it. They lap it up. They bite and then lap up the blood, often from cows. But the thing that I found a little bit surprising was some of the history here, because Vlad the Impaler lived in the 1400s, and he killed a lot of people in the 1400s. I don't know exactly when bats were associated with that vampire story or with vampire stories as a whole. It seems like they go back farther than the 1400s in Europe, but I don't know. And the reason that that's interesting, to me at least, is because bats only live, vampire bats rather, only live in South America. And that means that they could not have influenced European legends and myths prior to the contact between the Americas and Europe, which was, of course, 1492. So I don't know if that's just a coincidence, or if the legends of bats consuming blood came about after someone said, hey, there's these bats over here that are actually consuming blood. So a lot of the Western depictions are very negative. Part of that is, I'm sure, because bats are mostly out at night, and night is, dark and scary and all that. But if you look at things in, let's say, Christian mythology, if you look in Christian mythology where you have demons and devils, they're usually portrayed as evil, of course, evil creatures, and usually as being portrayed with bat wings. You can see here that a wing that has various notches in it like this is a bat wing, even in this point, in this case, to having a thumb up on the top, just like other bat wings that we've already seen. We certainly see that in the evil, scary dragons. They're also portrayed with bat wings. I find it interesting that they're always portrayed as reptiles with bat wings, because of course bats are mammals. So if there were a reptilian dragon, you would expect it to have a reptile wing. And as we saw, there were reptiles that did actually fly, and those would be pterosaurs. So a more biologically probable wing for dragons would be the pterosaur wing that has just one super, super long finger. And you can see here that this bat wing that's portrayed on this dragon even has joints in the fingers, just like joints in the fingers in bat wings, and claws at the ends, just like real bats have, and even has the thumb you can see right here. Now, I have to say that I don't know exactly what that thing is supposed to be pointing off the elbow on the dragon's wing, because of course bats don't have an elbow spike like that. But you know, this is a fantasy creature. Probably the clearest way it's a fantasy creature is anyone who's familiar with biology knows that these wings in all the vertebrate cases have evolved from our forelimbs, from our arms. And that's why bats have their wings, and then they've got their hind legs, and they don't have another set of limbs. Whereas dragons, of course, often have front legs like this dragon does, and back legs and wings. And so that means they have 6 limbs, which of course is not something we see in real vertebrates. There are, however, sometimes when dragons are drawn a little bit more biologically accurately and have their front limbs being their wings, as we see here. So scary dragons, scary bat wings, but it's not always negative. In a lot of Asian cultures, bats are sometimes portrayed very positively. Here we see the 5 legendary bats of the Chinese idea of Wu Fu, which is the 5 blessings for everyone's life. These bats bring these 5 blessings, which are health, wealth, longevity, a virtue or the love of virtue, and a peaceful death. So a very nice way to interface with bats here. And we've seen this in a variety of places, including on this old coin right here from China. So that's some of the ways. There's, of course, just like so much else in this talk, there's a lot more to cover with that. And there's whole conferences on how different cultures see bats and have portrayed bats. But next time we see Batman, remember that there's a whole range and a lot of really cool ways in human history that people have looked at bats. So let's take a look at some of the incredible scientific details that we found from studying bats. Some of the neat things about bats is if we look at mammals as a whole, we see that if we break down the number of species in different families and in the mammal order, mammal class rather, then we see when we look at the orders, we see all kinds of different orders of mammals. However, bats make up 1/5 of all mammals as far as the number of different species go. Wow, that's a lot of bats. Well over 1,000 species of Microchiroptera bats and nearly 200 of the Megachiroptera. As we saw before, Chiroptera, of course, means hand wing. A lot of us already know what we get when we look at micro or mega. Micro are, of course, small bats, and mega refer to some of the larger bats. There's also a lot of other differences between these 2 groups of bats. The Microchiroptera are usually insect eaters that fly around at night and use their echolocation to catch insects, whereas the Megachiroptera are much more often fruit-eating bats. So a difference in the diet there. Just as a point of trivia here for the extremes, the largest bat is the flying fox that we saw earlier. It is, of course, part of Megachiroptera, and it's therefore a fruit-eating bat. So people look at these scary bats and they think, oh no, some of them consume blood. And then they show a picture of a flying fox and it's like, yes, but not that one. That one eats mangoes. So reason not to be too scared by a flying fox. It's not going to eat you. The other extreme is if we looked at the really small bats in Microchiroptera, the smallest bat is less than 1 inch long. It is literally the smallest mammal alive. And it's easy sometimes, if it's flying fast, to mistake it for an insect. The other thing that jumps out at people when they see this chart is they say, hold on a second, what's that giant blue thing? That's rodents, rats, and mice, and rabbits. I'm sorry, not rabbits, they're Lagomorpha. But rodents, if you looked at rodents like mice and rats, they make up this giant blue chunk. And you can see from the pie chart there that most mammals, well over half, are either rodents or bats. Bats come in a wide range of all kinds of really cool evolutionary adaptations. A lot of these, you can see some very interesting ear shapes to help their echolocation that we'll talk about. A lot of these ear shapes are to give them special advantages and features that is specifically tuned to their type of prey or their type of food. You can see that some of the Megachiroptera don't have these giant ears that you need if you're trying to catch insects, that you might not need if you're trying to catch fruit, because fruit don't tend to fly as fast. You also see all kinds of different shapes in the noses and in the head. Some of those actually have to do with actual plant adaptations to work with plants. And that's because a lot of bats get a significant amount of their nourishment from nectar, from flowers, and will therefore pollinate the plants. Now, I don't know about you, but one of the most incredible things about bats to me is their radar systems. Their echolocation system, of course, works a lot like radar, where they send out a pulse, as you can see on the bottom here. And that pulse bounces off things just like radar. And when it comes back, they hear it and pick it up. And from the pulse reaching the different ears, their two different ears, at slightly different times, they can see where it is or hear where it is and be able to actually catch it in the air while it's trying to get away. That's an unbelievable amount of precision for this really cool system. Now, the amazing thing to me is, in addition to the accuracy and the stunning precision that they can get out of this system, it amazes me to imagine what it's like to be a bat and see with two overlaying types of vision at the same time. And the reason I say types of vision, even though this is not a vision system, is because that's the only way we can get through to human beings who use vision to make a picture of the world. This actually makes a picture. There's experiments that have been done with dolphins where they've used echolocation, that dolphins evolved separately. The common ancestor of bats and dolphins is, of course, way, way before bats had echolocation. And so these two systems evolved independently. And in the case of dolphins, they've shown dolphins a shape underwater in a way that they can't see it with their eyes, but can only see it with echolocation. And then shown them the same shapes above water where they can't use echolocation, but can see it with their eyes. And they found that the dolphins immediately recognize the shapes that they saw the other way. And that means you're actually forming a picture in your mind of the world. Can you imagine flying around and being able to see every branch, every leaf, every flying moth, every other bat, both with an overlaid system of echolocation? I mean, what color would that look? Would that look like shades of red and orange on top of your regular vision? It makes me think of like Terminator, where he overlays the picture and says, oh yeah, this person is a threat or not a threat or something like that. That's what bats see every time they go out. So those are some of the incredible things about bats. There's plenty more. Like, for instance, from a quick, easy question, is there such a thing as bat milk? Well, you think about it, you think, okay, bats are mammals. Mammals make milk. Yes, there is. There's actually bat milk, and bats live on it as babies. So here's some of the ways that, those are some of the incredible things about bats. Here's some of the ways that bats help us. One of the big ways they help us is pollination. They get right into those flowers to drink the nectar. You can see his little cute tongue is sticking out, and help those plants pollinate. A lot of those plants would not be able to pollinate without bats, and they would go extinct. And it's amazing to realize how many ways this pollination directly affects our lives. For instance, bananas pollinated by bats, avocados. I love avocados. We wouldn't have them without bats doing the pollination. Well, how about mangoes? A lot of these fruit-eating bats eat mangoes that are pollinated by bats themselves, and so so they really help this this species of mango exist at all. A lot of species of nuts are pollinated by bats. Figs pollinated by bats, and of course chocolate. How many of us could have survived through this pandemic without chocolate? Oh my gosh. So that's another way that wonderful, wonderful gift from bats. Whenever we have a bar of chocolate, we can remember these bats. And how many people are familiar with what's being harvested on the left there? Anybody? Just think about it. Excuse me?
Is that the agave plant?
That is good one. Yep. A small hint there. So when we're kicking back with our tequila, thank those bats that bring us the tequila. I think a lot of tequila bottles would look a lot cooler if they had a big bat on them. So so we can drink that, and we can call it bat whiskey if we want. The iconic saguaro cactus as well, also pollinated by bats. So here's a bat coming in for some of that pollination. And that's not the only way that bats help us. Another way is through eating insects. A lot of us spend time out on our decks like Anthony is, and those times are a lot more pleasant if they're not being mobbed by mosquitoes. Here in Michigan, bats are one of the main predators of mosquitoes, and our lives would be miserable in a lot of cases without the bats sucking up all those mosquitoes before they suck up our blood. It's amazing that they can catch these little mosquitoes right in the air using the equivalent of radar. It's also amazing, at least to me, how many they eat. I mean, think about this. How many mosquitoes would you have to eat if you were going to live only on mosquitoes? You'd have to eat a lot. A lot of bats consume more than their own body weight in insects every 24 hours. Wow, that's a lot of bugs. Now, because bats, you know, they're going to digest the soft parts of the insect, but insects have this hard exoskeleton of chitin, which the bats can't digest. And so a lot of bat poop is composed of significant amounts of chitin. And that means that for a lot of bats, their poop actually sparkles because of the shiny chunks of chitin. Wow, glittery poop. So they give us many, many ways to wonder more. What an incredible part of our world. All the way around the world, the bats are on every single continent except for one. Anybody already thinking of which one? It's, of course, Antarctica, the only batless continent. So here's some more awesome pictures of bats that can be cute or scary. And bats, of course, hibernate in the winter. So here's in a cave, we get a lot of bats. We do actually have places like this in Michigan, although they're more well-known farther south, where there's more caves, and there's more caves farther south, of course, because Michigan was smashed by glaciers 10,000 years ago, and a lot of other places weren't, so they still have underground caves. So with that, we will remember the coolness of these bats and why it's so easy looking at them to imagine someone with a cape that turns into bat wings. And another reason, another way for us to wonder more as we go forward in our lives. So thank you. That's my talk on bats. Any questions?
I got a question, John.
Yeah.
I heard that if a bat falls to the ground, it can't fly back up. Is that true?
No, that's not true. Bats can take off quite well from the ground.
I got a question. Why do they say blind as a bat and
Oh,
bat?
thank you. Yeah, great question, and I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to throw that in as a comment when I was talking about the echolocation, and I forgot to mention that. Bats are not blind. I don't know why we say that. I think we say that just because knowing about their echolocation, it's easy to think that they might not be able to see, but no bats are blind. Some of them have better or worse vision, and not being a bat, it's really hard to say exactly how much they rely on echolocation versus actual vision. I would think with it being all dark at night that they probably rely a lot more on echolocation, but no, bats are not blind. Some of them might not see very well, but they certainly all can see. Yeah, the expression should be blind as a mole because there are moles that are blind.
I got a follow-up question. I mean, not related, but I don't know if it's just me or if everybody has the feeling that bats are associated with disease, cleanliness issues. Do they carry disease? Not related to COVID.
Yeah, they can carry disease just like any other animal. I do not think they carry disease more often than other mammals. Of course, there's a variation. You know, some creatures, because of their diet and habit, are more likely to carry disease than others. I don't know where exactly bats fall on that scale. I know that they can get rabies, and like a lot of mammals, they can get rabies and they can transmit it to humans. And I'm sure that they're a greater threat for rabies than, say, an earthworm or something like that you really can't get rabies from. But as far as being overwhelmingly disease vectors, I don't think that's the case. I think that there's a range of, propensity to carry disease. I'm sure bats fall along that scale somewhere. I think that because bats have traditionally in the West often been vilified, that that perhaps the disease capability is overemphasized, and it's probably not as bad as is sometimes portrayed.
So it turns out that bats do host a variety of zoonotic diseases, but rodents host just a little bit more. So bats are the second most disease heavy.
Really?
Behind rodents, yeah.
By order. Mm-hmm. Yep. Or order. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I was actually just listening to a podcast on this, and apparently bats are because they're mammals, it's easier for viruses to mutate in them that can be caught by humans. So that's why the stereotype.
Oh, that makes sense for both mammals. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So we can catch stuff from them that mutates in them.
Mm-hmm.
What do they do during the day? Do they get around?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
What do they do during the day? Like, do they?
Oh, they sleep. They sleep during the day. They're nocturnal. They sleep during the day, and it's just like asking what a human does during the night. Are you asking where they go during the day? A lot of times they'll have caves or other dark places to go to. Here in Michigan, a lot of times they'll find places in hollow trees or things like that. And in fact, here in Michigan, because we don't have very many caves, it's very useful if humans would make them more bat houses. And we will all have an opportunity to do that very soon. Here is our Sunday Assembly August service project.
So why do they hang upside down? Are they incapable of perching right side up?
They are incapable of perching right side up. I don't know exactly why they evolved specifically to hang upside down. I think it was mostly to free up the hands for flight because they're already using those for flight. Now, birds, of course, are doing that too, and they perch right side up. I don't know why that happened other than just random chance, because evolution very often happens through chance. I see Patrick has his hand up.
I was just wondering, since it was mentioned that there are bats in every continent except Antarctica, I imagine there are some areas that don't have a lot of bats just because of the environment, but that just made me think of if there's bats in areas where, like far north, where the day and night are kind of flipped in the winter. So I wonder if bats would be active during the day, quote unquote, but it's actually dark out, and if it would switch, but maybe there's just no bats where there are the like Alaska type day and night flipping.
That's an interesting question. So let's take a look at a couple aspects there. First of all, let's look at the day and night with latitude. As you know, in the farther north you go, the bigger the seasonal change in light is. So it doesn't so much flip back and forth as in the summer. If you go very far north, especially up by the Arctic Circle, it's just light all the time. And it only gets a little bit dimmer or not even dim at all at night. And then in the winter, it's just dark all the time. That's the same for the South Pole. The seasons flip between the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere. For instance, it's a late winter now for the Southern Hemisphere. But day and night don't like actually flip, they just change in length. I think that as you brought up, the cold temperature is probably a bigger factor. If you've got giant skin things like this that have blood vessels through them, I mean, they're effectively radiators of heat. And it seems to me like you would have a really hard time existing in a place where it's really, really cold unless you're going to hibernate. Now, bats do hibernate during the winter. That's why we have bats in Michigan. So I don't know offhand how far north the bat ranges go, but it could be a problem in far northern Canada. It's worth Googling it. To see how far bat ranges go to the north and south for that matter.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, thank you.
Are you saying that they actually migrate from one area to the other, or is it just going?
I didn't say that. I know that they do actually hibernate, and some species of bats hibernate and don't migrate. I don't know if there's any migratory bats. That's a good question. Maybe someone can check on that real quick. Yeah, by the way, I'm not a biologist. I just happen to know a lot about bats and various aspects of biology. And so if I have said anything that is not what biologists say, then I'm wrong. I think I've been pretty consistent and caught the couple times I accidentally called a class an order. But again, that's worth saying, especially in today's age of disinformation, that if the consensus of the experts says that I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
What's your background, John?
My own background is I have a doctorate in material science. So so my background is in metallurgy. I've done a lot on nanotechnology, silicon research, and now especially on phase transformations in steels. I'm also involved with Big History, and I've been involved with the Big History project from a metallurgy standpoint, for instance, looking at the influence of metallurgy in Big History. Big History is the field of teaching and studying all of history as a whole from the Big Bang until today, so really big history. But most of my background is in metallurgy, and that's what my degree's in.
Yeah, this is a pretty good presentation for somebody who doesn't have a background. And,
oh, thank you.
well, yeah. Did anybody go to the bat exhibit at the museum in on Woodward. Which one? Which museum?
Cranbrook.
Yeah, Cranbrook. They had bat exhibit a couple times.
Wow, that sounds really cool. Everyone be sure to go to that. It sounds awesome. I'll be sure to bring the kids. I'm glad you mentioned that. I have not gone. Just moved to this area relatively recently.
So some bats do migrate for food. Other bats hibernate, and there are bats that do both. I did a Google search, and that's what the response I got from Google.
Excellent. Thank you, Victor.
Yep.
Okay, it sounds like we've got everything. You want to continue, Anthony? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. You want to switch the hosting back to me?
Sure. There we go. I think you've got the screen, right, Anthony?
No.
Anybody else whose screen is showing?
We see the screen of whoever is talking, or the face of whoever is talking.
Okay.
Well, that's your own personal setting. At the top right corner, you can change that around. All right, that's all we have for this assembly. Unless anybody has anything they want to add or comment on. Our next assembly is going to be, of course, the 13th of September. And we got lots of events, as already mentioned, about that in the meantime. How's everybody else feeling? Good? All right, let's wrap it up. Thank you very much for everybody tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Good to see everyone. See ya.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.